All right, we're in 1 Corinthians 9:13. And James, could we have you to read the first verse and start us off?
You are recording.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uk oidate hoti oita iera erga zomenoi ectu hieru estiusin hoito thusiasterio pros proced ruantes to thusiasterio sum merisontai. And I translated verse 13 as you do not know that the ones working out of the temple eat? Question. The ones who are serving at the altar share in the altar.
Okay. So you said you do not know, or?
Yes, sir. You do not know that the ones working out of the temple eat.
Okay. This is, I'm going to highlight it here. Atehote is a special expression, and it introduces an argument. All right. I want to notice on the screen here, I give all the places this is found. And it has ooh with a question, which expects a yes answer. So ooh may with a question expects a no answer. So right here he says, when ooh or uki is used with the question, it always implies the expected answer is yes. And here are the places that expression is found. It's found in Romans 6:16, John 19:10. Pontius Pilate asked it of Jesus. So in that case, it's singular, but that's the only difference. And here it's no ye not, it's plural. And so you all know, don't you? And so you know, don't you, that, and so he's introducing an argument here. And all these passages right in the middle of your screen, it's always introducing an argument. So that's kind of important for us. We saw it in 3:16 and 5:6, 6:2, and 3 and 9 and 15. And now we see it in chapter 9:13 and 9:24. We'll see it again. And then, of course, the last time we James 4:4. So he's introducing an argument for them. You know, don't you? That they that minister, the ones ministering, that's a middle participle, but that's middle passive. And so it's actually probably ministering, that's probably middle voice, but it's middle passive form, and I need to change my marking there to make it middle passive. And who do you think he's talking about?
The Jewish priests and stuff that labor in the holy things.
Probably the Jewish priest. Sure, I don't think it'd be pagan priest, but I think it'd be using the Jewish priest. There's ministering about, and look at this word for minister, egadzomai. And that's to be working in it, actually like you're, and it's ergodzomai, and so you're busy at the business, doing the business of this. It becomes basically your vocation. It's what you're doing.
This is the first of two examples of why he should get to do that too.
Yeah. And so we see it in 9:24 also. They minister about sacred things. I think it's the Levitical priests were given a tithe. And so here he says, they eat of the things of the altar. The priest under the law of Moses got to eat part of the sacrifice was given to them for their food. And so they eat of the things of the temple. This is the Herion, And this, then there's two words for temple. I'll highlight them right now. And that way my mouse doesn't put something over it. And those differ in the former designates the whole compass of the sacred enclosure. That's the one we're looking at here. Whereas naos is the basically the inner part of the temple. Okay. Any comments there of anybody?
I think Jesus used naos in chapter 2 of John, didn't he, when he said, destroy this temple and I shall raise it up in 3 days?
I don't remember. We'd have to check it, but probably did. I would guess he probably did.
And I think in Revelation, hieron is not used, and only naos is used.
So, anyhow, upon the altar, they that wait on the altar, the ones waiting, it's an articular participle. So literally, it functions as an adjective. And so it's adjectival. The ones waiting on the altar is describing them. They're waiting on the altar people. They're persons that wait on the altar. They're waiting on the altar people might even carry that thrust.
I put attending just because it does sounds like you're not waiting on something, that you're actually doing a function.
Yes. Well, I'm thinking like a waiter in a.
I know.
Yeah.
They're that
Yeah.
way, so I thought,
Yeah.
well, somebody can
No.
easily misunderstand that. So.
Yeah, and I might footnote it there. Yeah. Upon the altar, place or sacrifice are made. But see, they have their portion with the altar. Now, we can go back to the law of Moses and see that. I didn't put that in my notes. I probably ought to, for documentation purposes. I probably need to do that.
The fat and the gall and stuff all got burned up, but they got to eat of the meat part.
Yeah. So I translated it, know ye not that the ones ministering about sacred things, eat of the things of the temple, and the ones waiting upon the altar have their portion with the altar. And so you translated, instead of waiting, you put what?
Attending.
Attending.
Yeah.
Attending.
Attending.
Okay. Attending
to the altar.
Okay.
At the altar.
Okay. Attending at the altar. Might footnote it. James, you got anything you want to add there?
Oh, no, sir. I use the word serving instead.
Okay.
Do you have a sacred or using sacred things because of the temple association?
So, yeah. Ministering about sacred things. And right here, where I got the sacred things. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the things.
Oh, yeah,
sacred.
this neuter. Oh, okay. I think I just put
So we
temple.
got this, and we got the sacred things over here. That would be your sacred things right here. There's my note got highlighted there. Okay. Now I footnoted sacred things and ministering and working about and of the things sacrificed. Say sacred things in Greek. Right. Right.
Actually, I put laboring in that particular case too. I don't know why I did that instead of ministering.
I go back over the class and listen to it, and I change some of my notes. That way, I don't change them right now. My master computer is at home, so I'll do that later. I'll listen to this class a time or two before I settle down.
Okay.
All right, verse 14. Jerry, would you read that for us, please?
Hutos kai kurios diatoxin tois to evangelion katangelusin ek tu evangeliu zain. I put and in this manner, or could be the same manner, I think. And in this manner, the Lord commanded the ones, and I added that, proclaim the gospel, to live out of the gospel.
Okay.
Or maybe of the gospel. I think I marked through out. I
The
circled
King
it.
James says ordained. Let's see what the King James says, ordained. And this is to prescribe something, give an order, arrangement, something arranged. And you put what here? Command?
Commanded,
Okay, well, he did, but he made this arrangement, see?
yeah.
It's an arrangement he made, and it was through his commandments, of course, that's certainly true. That the ones, and again, we have a participle, the ones doing what?
Where's my participle?
Katangelo is what it's from, it's
Oh.
participle. The publishing or proclaiming,
That's a participle?
that's participle.
I must have copied the wrong line. I got a present active indicative.
It's participle. So
Well,
it's not-
I probably looked on the line above it or below it.
Okay, hold on a minute. The ones that proclaim is not a part. Okay. The ones, no, it's not a participle. I'm sorry. It's a present tense verb. Okay. All right.
Okay, so that proclaim is okay?
That proclaim is good. The gospel. I looked at it, thought it was participle right at first. I'm sorry. All right. The ones that proclaim the gospel, the good news, they should what?
They live out of the gospel.
Live out of the gospel. The source and ek is what goes with what case. Ek only takes one case.
Ablative.
Genitive?
Ablative.
Ablative. Oh, yeah.
So it's the source of their living. To live, it's an infinitive, out of the gospel. And so the gospel is their source of their livelihood. And there's not anything wrong with a man preaching full time and the church supporting him full time. So,
Well, they had to because he wouldn't even let them take script or money or any
that's
extra
on
clothing.
the limited commission, of course.
Yeah, but I think that's what he's kind of referring to here too.
All right.
Because that's the second example. They did it under the law of Moses. They did it under Christ's limited commission. And so that means it's a universal way of doing business that God did set up.
Okay. I didn't take this to be the limited commission, but I'll have to restudy it and think about it.
Well, maybe not the limited, but the apostolic.
All right. I've translated even so. Kai can be translated as even. And so even so, or in this manner, say, did the Lord.
I put also, and I said and. I don't know why, because.
And also is not necessarily wrong translation.
I didn't put and, I just said also in this manner the Lord, because that's the second example.
Yeah. Did the Lord ordain that they.
And then I wrote in
proclaim
here.
the gospel, or to live out of the gospel. I've translated out of. So God, just in the New Testament, it's like the Old Testament. They got their support for serving as priests, and the Levites, the whole tribe of Levi, got the tithe, but he doesn't tell us that, but they did. And the priest could take from the altar, okay, take part of it, a portion of it, okay. Right? Any questions or comments? Okay, Chris, could you take verse 15? Now this, I believe, is an additional discussion of the giving up of our liberty to advance the cause of Christ. So I think he goes over to a new subject. And really, if they were dividing into chapters and doing it right, this probably would be a new chapter because it's a new thought.
You know, I used the word commanded. What did you use instead of commanded in 14?
Even so did the Lord ordain. He made this arrangement. It's an arrangement.
Yeah, because it wasn't a
Diatasso.
command,
I think it's
otherwise
diatasso.
Paul couldn't have done something different.
Let me get here. Or diatasso, yes. Tasso is to arrange, and dia is to thoroughly or to prescribe it.
Yeah, because a command does not fit, because then Paul would have been disobeying.
Right.
Okay.
We made an arrangement. It was an arrangement.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, verse 15, please, Chris.
Ego de udinai ek rasamman tuton uk igrafsa de tata hina utos ginai tai in imoi kolon gar moi malon apothanein a to ka cox emma mu hina tis kenose. I have, but I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things that it should be done to me. For it is good for me to die rather than that a certain person make my glory void.
So I'm not arguing this so you'll support me. So it's not a self-serving thing he's doing here. All right. What do you think these things refers to?
The support.
It has to be the support. These is the near object and those are the distant objects. So it's the things he just got through discussing, the support. And that's what it has to be. Because these things refer to the proofs that he's introduced in verses 1 through 14, establishing that he had the right to support by the church. And he has, you said a certain one. How did you translate that?
A certain person?
Yeah.
Or certain one, tis.
Yeah, it's singular too, so it's not certain ones, but a certain one. So somebody, it appears one person was challenging Paul's apostleship in order that they could reject his doctrine. Might be a Judaizer or someone else, we don't know. They seem to have argued that Paul must not be a true apostle since he didn't have a wife and didn't accept support from the church, right? But Paul had answered both of these objections in the first 14 verses. See? So in that context, we see somebody apparently is making an argument on these 2 points about Paul's apostleship. We can kind of determine that from the context. And I write not, ook is, I do not write, see, these things, these again, same things, that I may be done in my case. Now look at the word translated case on the middle of the screen. It's MI. And so that's an emphatic form of it. Okay. And so if this were the instrumental case, it would be not saying in my case, or it would be Paul does not want to use his rights, not that they not be used by him in these matters. So done by me, see, by me. So it could be, if it was an instrumental case, it could be by me, right? And what I did, I think I gave a footnote with that. We'll see what I did. For, now he's going to explain why now. It would be good, it were good. Now this is not agathos good, morally good, but it's kalos. It's good because it has everything in its right proportion. It fits in and accomplishes. It's a word that's used in the feminine form for a beautiful woman because her face is proportional and all that. Everything's as it ought to be in the right proportions. That's the idea of it. It's balanced and proportionate. Let's highlight it here and you can see what I'm talking about. I'll make it a highlight. Referring to beauty, especially from the Greek viewpoint of that which is harmonious and complete, something with all of its parts are balanced and proportionate. So there's a balance in this balanced approach to things. For me, you see, that could be an instrumental case. Whether or to me, and to die, rather to die. It would be better to die than do what saves the most souls. I think Paul is saying, it's better for me to die than to not do what is going to save the most souls. Paul is trying to save souls. That's in the context. So this is a thought that may not be foremost in the mind of some members of the Lord's church. It's not foremost because they're not spiritually minded, but are carnally minded. They would rather hang on to this life and to die for what is right and spend eternity with all the holy ones of all times. And that's when the rubber meets the road, and if we become called to give up our lives. Paul was, go ahead.
Is 1 Corinthians one of the ones he probably wrote when he was in prison? Or is that before this?
Possibly.
Because that could have been why someone was choosing.
It's not considered a prison epistle.
It's not, okay. I was thinking if it was, then it might have been one of the rationales.
Yeah.
We can't support a prisoner, and Paul's taking advantage. We're spending,
He might have written it when he was at Caesarea not in prison, but kind of like a house arrest before they sent him to Rome. That's a possibility, okay? But some take it some other times, okay? All right? And that any man, a certain one, should make my glorying void. Now, the glorying here, I don't think is glorying in what he did, but it's glorying in what the Lord could do through him. I think there's a difference. We should be just happy as a lark, if you know what I mean, if we're able to influence people to become Christians and just be all smiles and happy, and should be happy about that. And so this is a point of praise. One glories or can glory, a matter of ground of glorying. But he says, and make it empty or no count or void. Paul gloried in the fact that they would do these things, that it was instrumental in converting more lost souls. I think that's what he was happy about. And so the idea of glorying is kind of negative to us, and rightfully so, but it's not always. If you can say, look what the Lord has done through us, or look what the Lord has done, and you're not elevating yourself, you're trying to elevate the Lord. So that's, and I think the Lord was being glorified by his work. But I have used none of these things, my translation, I write not that these things that it may be so done in my case, or were good for me rather to die than that a certain man should make my glory void. Any comments? All right, verse 16. Then he turns and discusses this glory, lest someone thinks he's boasting, I think, the next verse. All right, back to James. Can you go with it, James? You just got,
Yes, sir.
Shane's not in tonight. Okay.
Eon gar, euangelizomai, ukestin moi, kaukema, excuse me, anake gar moi, epiketai, uai de, moi estin eon me, euangelizomai. And I translated that, for if I may preach the gospel, to me it is not boasting, for a necessity has been placed on me. It is a woe to me if I may not preach good tidings.
Okay. So it's a necessity, see, or if, and so it's aeon, and it's an if, and he's saying, under this condition, if I do preach the gospel, then I have what? I have not one thing to glory of. Against what's called the third class condition. All right, but it's in the middle voice. So I think that's
But
significant.
that I choose to preach the gospel. So
Oh,
it could
yeah.
get middle, however.
Okay, middle passive. It's middle passive, but it's probably middle voice. So I choose to preach the gospel. So that's the way I take it. I take it to be middle voice.
I took it as passive. And that's why I translated it, for a necessity has been placed on me.
Yeah.
So, he was called to do this, so to speak.
Okay, well, we'll have to all look that over because it could be middle or passive. The form will be either.
Yeah, I agree. I had to stop and consider, and then I leaned in a passive direction. Not that that's right.
Okay, well, I will give it consideration. I'll look at it and
Yeah,
see
I'm
what I
beginning to think that's probably
I
correct.
think all of us have to think it through, and that's good. We need to think that through. But it's just changing the thrust of it, it's all it's doing. And the thrust of what Paul is saying, if in the remote possibility that I'm self-serving, that's why I took it as middle voice. In my preaching of the gospel, then I do not have any reason to glory. Right? So I took it that way rather than the way you took it. But I'm going to go back and reconsider it, okay? For necessity, right? Necessity is a noun. It's something it's being personified, becomes active and laying itself on Paul, right? Is laid upon me again. This again is middle passive, okay? Necessity has laid itself upon me, or necessity is laid upon me. It's a necessity to me, probably dative. And the reason he couldn't glory, if his preaching was self-serving, he couldn't glory. It would be necessary for Paul to preach if he was preaching for the salary. And so this might be, that's what was my thinking. And then he says, for woe is me, alas, or woe unto me, or to me, dative case, probably dative. If I preach not, if I don't preach the gospel. Now, this is the middle passive again. And I think again that the preaching is middle. It's something he chooses to do. See, he made that choice. If it were Paul's duty to preach the gospel, Paul wouldn't be under condemnation for not fulfilling. He would be under condemnation for not fulfilling his duty. So woe is to him if he doesn't. He may be playing on words here with this second usage of preach the gospel, because it's for his own benefit that he preaches, even if he doesn't preach for money. Because Paul's preaching for his love of God, the church, and the lost of the world, so he benefits from this love. And I would argue from Matthew 22, 36, and 40 that he benefits. And my conclusion is that most likely explanation for the use of middle voice both times will be found in verses 17 and 18. All right. So let's go to those verses. Maybe we can get through them tonight. For if I preach the gospel for my own benefit, and that's how I translated it, I have nothing to glory of, for necessity is laid upon me, but woe is unto me if I do not preach the gospel for my own benefit. Right? And he was preaching it for his benefit, but it wasn't for money, see? So it was for a spiritual benefit. That's my conclusion. That's why I went with the middle voice, but I'll go back and restudy it, okay? Let's try verse 17. Jerry?
Mhm.
Hey, James, did you have anything else to add there?
No, sir. Sorry, I had it on mute.
Okay, that's all right. Jerry, could you take verse 17, please?
Agar, Ekon, Tuto, Brosso, Miston, Echo, de akon oikonomion pepistumai. This one I'm confused over. For I have a reward if I do this thing willingly. But if unwillingly, I have, and I put a stewardship, but I don't understand, that doesn't make any sense. But that's what I read. So I don't know.
Okay. Well, that's the word for stewardship, okay?
Yeah, and it says it's a stewardship I am entrusted with. So I put I have instead of I am entrusted with a stewardship. But if he's doing it unwillingly, then he's not exercising his stewardship. And it doesn't say that. So and the King James didn't know how to render it either. So it just sort of puts some things down there that are actually don't make sense either.
Or if I do, I practice. It's not the poieo, I do, it's that word for practice something. Okay? Habitual, make it a practice. If I do this of my own will, unforced, voluntary, see, of my own will. Words also found in Romans 8:20. I have a reward. So I have a reward if I do it my own will. And so the reward is going to be identified in verse 18. But if not of my own will, and it's not the word not, it's the alpha privative, see? And ekon, willing, not willing, unwilling.
That's what I put in willingly.
Unwillingly, right? I have a stewardship, right? Entrusted to me. Stewards were often trusted slaves who were basically forced to perform their duty at that time. Many of them were. And if a slave was a good steward, sometimes he'd get his freedom. Right? So that's maybe part of the background of this.
So really you could put, but if, and you could add, I do this thing unwillingly, because that's kind of the opposite of that.
I'm a slave, see?
Yeah, well, where do you get slave go?
Okay, look at the middle here, oikonomos, Thayer tells us. And it's to dispense or manage, and managers are to, whether freeborn or, as was usually the case, a freedman or slave. And the head of the house proprietor has entrusted management of affairs, care of the receipts and so forth. So here, if I'm doing it of my own will, I'm a free man. I have a reward. A freedman. See, you got two types of men normally were in this group. As Thayer tells us, the freed man, he's been freed. He was a slave, but he's freed, and the slave. So he's probably looking at both of those because that's the background of who would be in this role of a steward. And the freed man, he's kind of attached to his ex-master. And he goes out on his own and does his own business, but he stays close to the master, right? He maybe still works for him. He works for him for pay now. He's getting paid for it, getting a reward for it. Whereas when he was a slave, he had this role entrusted as a slave, but he wasn't paid for it. Now that's my view of it. Do you have any comments there? That help a little? And again, that goes along with what Thayer says. It's in the middle of the screen right now. So, all right. I'll highlight it and let you see what I'm talking about right there. Whether freeborn or, as was usually the case, a freedman. If he's freeborn or freedman, he gets paid. If he's a slave, he does it because he's got this role entrusted to him.
But either way, he's going to do it,
Yeah.
either of his own will or not of his own will, because he has to.
Does that make sense? What I'm
Well,
saying?
sort of, but it just seems like a strange thing to say.
Yeah, but these people understood about what who was a who would serve in this role as a steward. It'd be a
Yeah.
free man, a freedman, or a slave. And the free man and freedman would both be free and they'd get reward, they'd get paid for it. But the slave wouldn't get paid, but he has this dangling in front of him. You do a good job for me and I'll make you a freedman. Freed, F-R-E-E-D, freedman. That's kind of one way they got him to do a good job. And if they could see that they freed a man that was there in that role, even when they got him to go free, they now begin to pay him, and he is able to work for other people too and make more money on his own. Does that make sense? So it's an incentive to do it. And that's how I view it. James, did you have any comments or thoughts on that?
No, sir. I thought yours were apropos.
All right. All right. Let's look at verse 18. Maybe that'll help us a little more. Hopefully we finish that and then we'll quit tonight. Okay.
Me,
Chris, could you do verse 18, please?
Yes. Tis un moi estin ho mistos hina euangelizomenos ada anon theso to euangelion to Christu eis to me kata resestai te exousia mu in to euangelio. I have, what is my reward then? That in the preaching of the gospel, I should offer the gospel free of charge, that I do not, that's a hard one, used up my authority in the gospel. Some have abused. I'm not really sure what to do with that one.
What then is my reward? And when I preach the gospel, this is a participle now. This is a participle. Menos ending, okay? And it's in the process of preaching the gospel, see, I set or place in place or set, establish, may make the gospel of Christ, the gospel, without charge, without expense. So basically, he's saying, I'm going back like I'm a freeman, I'm freed, I've been freed from my sins, but I serve my ex-master, I serve him freely, without expecting some pay, without charge, right? Without expense. So why would you do that? Why would a freed man do this? I love that master so much, I'm going to serve him, and I'll serve him in that role, and I can serve myself and support myself by other means. I think he's so delighted that he's been freed that now this becomes a motivation to serve without remuneration, without being paid. Does that make sense? And that's why he does this without charge. But that's just how I view it. And I would think a man who had been a slave and was freed, he'd be very appreciative of the master that freed him, wouldn't you think? And here he shows that great appreciation by not even charging.
You might want to bore your ears further than all.
Continuing in the role of a steward and still managing the ex-master's property, but now he's doing it without expecting any pay for it, and he could get paid, but he doesn't. He's not asking for it. He's doing it out of love for that master. I think that's in the background. I have the full right, and I could get remuneration, but I'm not, because I'm not exercising that right. Right. Now, this is a middle infinitive. To use to the full is an aorist one middle infinitive to make use, and so it's consumed for my own purpose.
I put exploited, but
Okay.
It may be a little strong term, too strong a
My
term.
right, my power, my authority, see. Right is exousia, authority or choice, or power. It's more authority
Yeah, exploded
in
my
the
authority.
gospel. So I have this authority in the gospel to be supported. I've already shown you that, proven that. But I'm not exercising that because I'm going to be a steward without pay, a freedman steward, which would be amazing when you think of it, because he's doing it out of great love for being freed from his sins. And now that's how I view this, right? James, you got any comments there or thoughts?
No, sir. I did notice, and this, I was going to make a comment a little bit further down. Could you back up to the Greek, please, again?
Sure.
Thank you. Oh, okay. And I'll wait till you do your translation, then I have a comment.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
What then is the reward given to me? And I put given in italics. That when I preach the gospel, make the gospel, may make the gospel, might make the gospel without charge, so as not to use to the full my right in the gospel. But I'm giving my commentary on it, which is explaining that a little more fully. But, and I don't think it comes out in the translation as how I'm seeing it here. Go ahead with what you had there now.
Now, you'll notice in your translation, you do not have the word Christ there. And if you'll back up to the Greek, I'm wondering why you excluded it. Did you just overlook it, or?
Gospel of Christ. I don't know.
But you may want to add it in.
You know why?
Why?
I copied the American Standard and then fleshed it out. And it's not in the text for the American Standard. That's why I did it. All
So
right?
there's a textual variant there?
Let's go back and see what the text is. All right? And that's footnote 294. It's supported by the majority text. I believe it should be there. Okay. And so you're right. I will insert that into my translation, and I wasn't careful. I just copied the American Standard and and translated based on it. And what I did is I went with the American Standard as long as it was good, but I did make changes in it. Okay? But I need to add the gospel of Christ right here. I'll put it in, and that's of Christ, I think. And it's of the Christ, of the Messiah, might be good, but that'd be Christ. So I would put of Christ. Right? Of the Messiah. See? That's better. And I'll change that for sure when I get home. That's absolutely for sure. I will change that. Any other comments there, James?
No, sir.
Okay. And that's what I did. And I've just explained I messed up. Okay. But American Standard doesn't have it because it's a textual variant. Okay.
I still hold the lead, by the way,
All
for messing up.
right.
Yeah, you're lagging far behind.
Okay. Well, let's see here. I've already made two mistakes tonight. I thought one was a verb was a participle, and looked at it a second time and it wasn't. Okay. All right. We're going to close out now, and we'll look at the new section. The main reason why Paul didn't support himself. Now he's going to give us another reason for this, and he's going to talk about what he did here. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it makes it a little more clear to me than